Okay, so here we are finishing up about the review and connecting all concepts. So we're still looking at demographic transition model and the stages and how they connect to all the various concepts. So we're talking about the population pyramids again. So here is our basic shape of our population pyramid for stage 2, stage 3, and then the various possibilities for shape for stage 4. So when we look at stage 2, it's more triangular. Again, you're going to see a fat bottom representing those high crude birth rates. And then you're going to see that this is filling out here as you have this declining crude death rate and that explosive growth. So that's where you see this filling out here at the base. And then you have this skinny top, which is representing that low life expectancy. This fat base, this fat bottom, these high birth rates, this is representing that young population, that high youth dependency ratio. Next is stage 3. Here we have our stage 3. You see that for stage 3, you still have to have a big bottom, but it needs to be shrinking. So it's going to be fat bottom over here on 2, and then it's a skinnier bottom over here on 4. 3 is in the middle. It's a shrinking crude birth rate. So it's a shrinking bottom, but it's still a big bottom. And then you see an increasing middle and top. This is representing that the average age of the population is increasing here. As you have the average age of a population, as we learned in stage 2, or in chapter 2, the average age of a population increases because of decreasing crude birth rates, so less babies being born, and then an increasing life expectancy. So that will push the average age of your population up because you have less young people and more older people. So that lower crude birth rate and that higher life expectancy pushes that average age of the population up because you have less young people and more older people, so that just pushes up that average age. Finally, here are stage 4. This is representing a slow, barely growing. See how that's still bumping out on the bottom? This is a really small bottom, but it's bumping out on the bottom. That's representing a slow, barely growing stage 4 country. And then you see here is the thicker middle and thicker top. This is representing that high life expectancy. And then here's your zero growth. You see this is sort of straight up and down here at the bottom. That represents that it's zero growth there. And then if it's coming in at the bottom like this, you see this is a real small bottom. If this is coming in at the bottom like it is here, that means it's negative growth. Almost, this is a shrinking population, almost as if it's inverted at the bottom. So stage 4 countries should have small little bottom, a bigger middle, and a bigger top. This is the high average age of the population in stage 4. Again, because you have those low crude birth rate, high life expectancy, it pushes up that higher the average age of the population because you have less younger people and more older people. This is the same thing, just being restated here. Here's your stage 1 population pyramid. You see that it's real fat bottom, and then this is representing those high death rates, and then very skinny top. This is during the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution thousands of years ago is what pushed countries even into stage 1 with the invention of farming. And so in stage 1, they have a high crude birth rate and death rate and a low natural increase rate. So there's really nothing going on here in stage 1. Stage 2, they have that explosive growth, triangular with that high crude birth rate, declining crude death rate, and high natural increase rate. This has the fat bottom, expanding top. These would what would be our LDCs. And again, these countries that pushed into stage 2 during the Industrial Revolution would have happened in the 1750s into the 1800s. Would have been England, United States, and Canada, and those countries in Europe as that technology diffused. And then for stage 2, countries that pushed in to stage 2 after World War II, which would have been in the 1950s and beyond, they did so with the medical revolution with access to new medical technology. This would have been Latin America, Africa, Southwest Asia, countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia. Stage 2 countries today, we have Sub-Saharan Africa, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Honduras, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and North Korea. Then you have the stage 3 countries. This is the stage 3 again. This is a declining crude birth rate, declining crude death rate, declining natural increase rate going on here. You have a shrinking bottom, an expanding middle, and an expanding top. This is as the crude birth rate declines because they have access to health care, family planning, birth control, and women's empowerment, women getting jobs, which is lowering that crude birth rate. So it's slowing, but it's still expanding here. That would be countries in Mexico, Panama, South America, like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru, India, China, and South Africa. Next, we have MDCs like the United States, Canada, countries in Europe, Japan, Australia, Russia, and South Korea. These are stage 4 countries. You see, again, here's our slow growth, just barely bumping out here on the bottom. So you have a low crude birth rate, low crude death rate, low, slow natural increase rate, small bottom, wider middle, wider top. This is your no growth. So again, this is more rectangular at the bottom. That's because it's completely even. This is representing no bumping out means that it's no growth. And if it's not shrinking in, that means it's not negative growth. This straight up and down represents no growth. And then same thing, low crude birth rate, low crude death rate, they're nearly equal. Small straight bottom, wider middle, wider top. And then you have your last option for stage 4, which is negative growth, low crude birth rate, low crude death rate. Usually this results in a negative because the death rate is higher than the birth rate. You have an inverted bottom, a wider middle, and a wider top. So let's talk about the immigration in the United States as immigrant destination. So again, we just talked about this in terms of where we see these migrants. We talked about this in the 3-2 impact of immigration on the United States. Please reference this map and you can get an idea of where people are traveling to. World migration routes since 1700s. So again, we have widespread migration from Africa to plantations in the South because of the forced migration of slaves, Europeans coming during colonization, and then people from India, China, Japan, mainly they are economic and political reasons. Talk about guest workers into Europe. So guest workers into Europe, you see this many coming from Northern Africa, and then a lot of coming from Turkey, from India, and then also from East Europe to work in the more successful industrial giants that are here in France, Germany, United Kingdom, and then some Scandinavian countries. But again, this is guest workers. These are legal status. They are just coming as temporary workers. Time contract workers, you see a lot of this in Asia, especially people who are traveling around Southeast Asia to the more successful countries of Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, so that they can fill low skill, low labor, low paid jobs there. Again, this is legal but temporary status. Let's talk about the migration of Vietnamese boat people. So this is after the war in Vietnam, people fleeing on boats. So they were considered refugees from the war because of political persecution. We just talked about this migration pattern with the core periphery model. Again, we have the periphery. These are the LDCs, the stage 2 countries. The semi-periphery are the DC, stage 3 countries. Core would be MDCs, stage 4 countries. So this would be like people migrating from Guatemala to the United States. They're migrating from LDC, stage 2, the periphery, and they will migrate to the semi-periphery, which would be Mexico in this case, or to the core, to the United States. So we know core periphery model, This is again explaining that countries of lower development, LDCs, will migrate to DCs, or to LDCs. LDCs will migrate to DCs or MDCs. Those that are in DCs will migrate to MDCs. This is a economic, whereas the periphery and semi-periphery, they are highly dependent upon the core, which are the MDCs. Distance decay, again, this is that after shorter distances away, we'll have more interaction, more spatial awareness, more cultural influence, and as you get further away from a place, the less the influence will be. And then chain migration, this is as people migrate and then subsequent people follow and settle and cluster in the same area, the ethnic groups like Polish people in Chicago, so that they could assist and help one another, or Chinese people in Chinatown in San Francisco, so that they can help one another. When we talk about migration within the United States, again, you see how this has changed. First, it was migration settled here on the East Coast, and then people moved into the interior, moved west. So historically, the most consistent was people moving west, and then more recently, people shifting to the south. You see this on the graphic here as we moved west, and then more recent times, people shifting to the south. Migration from rural to urban areas, you see this migration from rural to urban is the highest in LDC and DC countries, because you have so many people who are living in the rural areas as farmers trying to move into the cities for more opportunity. Countries in Europe, Anglo-America, Russia, Japan, so these MDC countries, they will already have a significant amount of people living in the cities and the urban areas. Intra-regional migration within the United States, so we have vast majority of people are moving from the urban to the suburban areas around cities, as people you have urban, this is where young people want to live, young professionals, people who are looking for more action around a city, and then people move from the cities to the suburban areas like Winter Park, whenever they have families and they're looking for a little bit bigger land for bigger houses, more established neighborhoods and safer school systems and such. And then sometimes you see rural to urban, sometimes you see urban to rural, but these are less frequent than the urban to suburban. You can see trends in urbanization in more developed countries. Again, you see the highest numbers of urbanization are currently in more developed regions, but you can see that cities in LDCs, Latin America, Asia, Africa, and worldwide, by 2030, this is the projection of the percentage of people who will be living in cities. So this is where we see a greater impact of natural disasters, greater impact of on natural resources for electrical grids, but also greater opportunities for for services that are necessary within cities, and more building and more demand for housing. So again, we have migration from the metropolitan to the non-metropolitan areas. So during the late 20th century, so late 1900s, more developed countries of North America, so Anglo-America and Western Europe, they had this new trend where people were moving from the urban areas into rural areas. Because of people being able, they call this counter-urbanization, by the way, this urban to rural migration pattern is called counter-urbanization. And this is that people want to move into small towns and rural communities. They are looking for this idyllic lifestyle. A lot of times it's retired people. Sometimes it's people who are telecommute, meaning that because their job is very dependent upon technology, they can live anywhere, and many are choosing the rural areas because they're cheaper and they're perceived to be safer. And so future trends are very unpredictable in more developed countries because future economic conditions are difficult to forecast, so they're not sure what is going to happen. But we can see that cities in the South, like Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, cities in Texas like Dallas, cities like Phoenix, Santa Fe, San Diego, all of these cities in the south have seen substantial growth as people have moved from the north to the south as part of this regional trend. Thanks, guys.